alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947.
You know flat earthers, I guarantee it. But you don't know who they are because they're afraid of talking about it.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system.
Hello and welcome to the special episode of Subliminal Deception Podcast, your weekly dose of conspiracy theory bullshit. My name is Cody, and I'm joined by my pal Phil. How are you?
Doing awesome, Cody. How about yourself?
Not doing too bad. We're in the midst of a blizzard. But anyway, we're going to get right to the point, basically. With the holidays and everything, and you were traveling to see the Iowa Hawkeyes bowl game, we kind of decided we're going to take a look at what happened in 2019 and a look forward in 2020, kind of in the conspiracy world. We got some conspiracies. We're going to talk a lot of alien sightings and stuff that happened in 2019, and all that fun stuff. Why don't we start off? We can't not do the hot sheets. Let's get everybody primed with a good hot sheet story, Phil. So take it away.
All right, so this one, actually, I have not purchased the brand new National Enquirer. That will be for next week's episode. So I looked back into the previous National Enquirer. Teen murder suspect's mom turned him in.
Wow, okay. Well, I mean, technically, that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you'd feel about your mom turning you in, I guess I would have a mixed feelings about it. So, a law-abiding mom turned in her 13-year-old son who'd escaped from custody after being charged with double murder in North Carolina.
A 13-year-old killed two people. Holy shit.
Yep, 13 charged with double murder. So you're pretty much fucking done at that point.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure most states got rid of that, like, protecting minors, depending on what you've done. I'm pretty sure murder is always, you get tried as an adult. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, you don't just get to go home when you're 18 anymore. You're, because that's how it used to be, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
A person would basically spend until they're 18 in juvie, and then they just go home, and it'd be wiped.
Well, I think it's depending on what happened, but the most important part of that was that once you got out of jail or wherever the hell you were at, your records would be hidden. So if you were a kid who killed someone or something, you got out of prison, you're applying for jobs, or like people are doing background checks on you or whatever, they wouldn't be able to see any of the crimes that you committed. So you could basically just act like it never even happened.
They would never see the crimes you committed, but would they see that you were in some kind of trouble or had some kind of record?
I don't think so.
Wow.
Obviously Ed Kemper, the kind of meme to Bumblebutt podcast, he was the same thing. He killed his grandparents and then was in juvie or a mental asylum or whatever. And once he got out, nobody knew that he killed his grandparents, especially the cops. If he got in trouble, they never could see that he had done that. But I'm pretty sure that law's changed.
And he's one of those dudes who was like kind of a normal dude, so you wouldn't really know it just by looking at him or meeting him.
No, not at all.
That's fucking scary.
Yeah.
So I jumped right back into it. Jericho Werrell was being held in a cell at juvenile court, barefoot and wearing leg shackles, when a staffer opened the door and he went on the run on November 5th.
Wow, after being arrested. Oh, you're saying before he got arrested for the double murder.
No, he was arrested and in custody, and somebody apparently left the door open and he got the fuck out. It kind of sounds like he might have been, like, let go by somebody, because how did he escape shackled with just the door being let open? So it's a little weird.
I don't know, maybe they assumed a 13-year-old wasn't going to run for it? I don't fucking know. That's weird.
Yeah. With Werrell and a 19-year-old man facing multiple charges in connection with the murders of two brothers, authorities immediately launched a massive manhunt and issued a chilling warning. And this is what they say. Division officials have a high degree of concern for the safety of both the juvenile and the public due to a prior history of assaultive and predictable behavior. And that's from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, and they wrote that on Facebook.
Wow, okay. So,
Yeah.
damn. Okay, well, so this guy's still out there somewhere, huh?
Yeah, well, that's where the story kind of comes to a head.
I see what you're
So,
saying.
After he fled, Werrell reportedly managed to remove his shackles and walked along a railroad track. The teenager stayed at his grandmother's abandoned home, found a bicycle, and waited until dark to ride to the home of his uncle. And this was said by his mother, Nikki Jacobs.
Wow.
Now, according to his uncle Wayne Lambert, Werrell wanted food and a shower and begged his uncle not to send him back. But his mother turned him over to the U.S. Marshals Service Fugitive Task Force around 10 p.m. on November 6th. So he spent a total of about 1.5 days on the run.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really blame the mother that much. It's a complicated situation to turn your son in, but he is a double murderer, so, you know, it's maybe she knew he was dangerous too or something. You never know, you know.
That's possible. All I know is what I've read from the National Enquirer. So who knows? She might have thought that he's, you know, gonna kill someone else if he gets on the loose. So
I mean, that's very possible. But anyway, let's start heading into the whole reason we're here. So we're gonna start off with basically kind of looking back on 2019. Now, there's basically 3 main conspiracies that kind of rose from the ashes in 2019, but we're not gonna discuss them too much because those merit full episodes. So basically, the 2, I don't know, I guess they're all 3 are big, but the 2 main ones are obviously Pizzagate, which I haven't looked super deep into it, but it looks like it's been debunked. But I'm sure there's still plenty of crumbs there to look at. And then we have, obviously, the one everybody talks about, the goddamn murder of Epstein. Well, hold on. The suicide, air quotes, suicide of Epstein. We don't really know. A lot of people have been tossing out names of who killed him. What are some
Epstein? What's that?
I was gonna say, what are some of the names that you've heard?
Yeah, Epstein's a really interesting one because usually you talk about conspiracies and you're like, okay, this guy committed suicide, but a small select group think that he may have been murdered. But when you talk about Epstein, it's like, okay, everyone believes that he was murdered, but a small select people believe that he committed suicide. That's the craziest one to me because no one actually believes that he committed suicide.
I mean, yeah. The weird thing is someone with such a high profile as that guy, you feel like they'd be watching him. You know, usually prisoners like that, they watch them very closely to make sure they don't kill themselves. Wasn't he on suicide watch too?
Yes, he was. Yeah, it's kind of weird because every little thing that you expect to hear, like when there's a suspicious, you know, suicide or murder in a prison, is like, well, the guards were supposed to check up on him every once in a while. Well, the guards fell asleep. Okay, that's convenient. Well, there's a camera right outside of his jail cell. That camera was broken. That's super convenient. Like,
yeah,
every little thing. And there's the broken bone in his neck that's only broken when someone strangles you to death. And that was broken, supposedly, from what I've read. I haven't looked super deep into it.
Well, I mean, if you hang yourself, it's going to break too. But I can't remember. I've heard it in true crime a million times. It's like the thorax bone or some shit like that. Now, I will say this, coming from a lot of true crime knowledge, I do know for certain that there's plenty of criminals, murderers, or whatever, who were on suicide watch and the guards just like kind of disappeared for a minute and then the person ended up killing themselves. So it's not the most unheard of thing, but yeah, someone in his position, they had to have known it would look really, really, really suspicious. I think the camera thing is what makes me really wonder.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, incompetence among like just your standard like local jail prison guards isn't super surprising. Like, just from what you hear about, shit going on, like, in other true crime stories. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. He's real famous. Who's the guy who just kept escaping from prison? Like, they could not keep him in jail.
El Chapo?
Well, El Chapo is one of them, but he's a serial killer. One
Ted
time
Bundy.
he escaped. Ted Bundy,
Yeah.
He kept just escaping out of prison. Like, he would just find a way just to make his exit. So
That's true. But then again, that was in the, 70s, 80s. So times have changed a lot. You'd assume with all the cameras and stuff, that's not really possible now. And they've learned their lesson. But am I believing this? If I recall correctly, Epstein essentially was throwing pedophile parties for like really rich and elite people, correct?
Yeah, he had like this island with like a weird temple style home on it. And he would throw like huge parties and fly people in on his own jet. And he basically, from what I've heard, he gathered dirt on all of these people and had pictures of them with underage, basically victims of human trafficking is what they really were, but underage people. And yeah, supposedly he had a list and he had evidence that he was going to come out with before he committed suicide, quote. Unquote.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you can see why that comes off as extremely fucking suspicious. But like I said, this is obviously will merit an entire episode here, so but it's I don't know, it's crazy. I think a lot of people thought after he committed suicide it was gonna like blow the lid off of everything, but somehow they've really buried it.
Yeah, I really think if he was allowed to live and testify, I really think it would have blown the lid off of things. But now that he died, all of the investigation into it just kind of went to shit. Like, oh yeah, he's dead, so whatever,
Yeah. I mean, you never know. 2020 is a new year. Maybe something will come creeping out of the woodwork. What's the final big one, Phil?
Oh, there was a big one. I haven't heard a shit ton about it, but I have had people message me and email me about it. Basically it's this username QAnon or Quinon. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. A lot of people believe, and this person's been like on message boards, like talking all sorts of shit. A lot of people believe it's Trump, and it's supposedly tied to JFK Jr.'s accidental death or possible like assassination.
Okay, yeah, okay. From what I remember hearing about QAnon, like obviously there's a message board thing, but weren't they in quote direct contact with Alex Jones too? Where they're like feeding him information or some shit?
Oh, I hadn't heard that one.
I thought I had heard that. See, again, we'll have to like deep dive into that. You know what? I wouldn't really put it past our president to do something like that. He seems to take to social media quite often, so who knows? You could see him hiding in some room on a message board or something.
Oh, definitely. And he does kind of have like propensity to pretend that he's other people, including like his own publicist. Like he'll pretend to be his own assistant. While he's on the phone talking to like newspapers or media. So he does like to pretend to be other people.
Yeah.
And, feed him shit. Or feed him his little crazy ideas, possibly. That's kind of, I mean, honestly, it's kind of, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but if it was him and this is all just a big swerve, a big fuck you from him, it's kind of a fun, cool thing that he does,
That's true.
Like,
that would be true.
I don't know.
Like,
I mean,
he's like the president and apparently like a huge internet troll. I don't know.
He's already known to be a huge Twitter troll. Like,
I don't know. I thought that, yeah, he is kind of a troll, but I think he's like serious and people assume he's trolling, right? Isn't that the bit?
Yeah, people aren't sure quite if he's fucking with anyone or if he's actually means this stuff, because there's so many Trumps. Like, everyone who meets him, I guess he's one of those people you get kind of like a different impression. If you don't like him, you're going to think he's a moron. If you like him, you're going to think he's a genius.
Yeah.
And, like which one are you, like if you're in his camp, then you're obviously going to have a positive light about him no matter what. But,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's, to say the least, it'll be an interesting time in American history when we look back on it many, many years from now. So, I don't really know. I don't really know what people are going to say like 20 years from now.
Well, about that, like, so Nixon, the leaker of all of the shit that happened with, like the Nixon impeachment was Deep Throat. And we didn't find out who Deep Throat was until like, I think 10 years ago or so. I'm hoping with like how technology is and how people can find everyone now through the internet, I'm hoping we find out who it is a lot quicker so we can do like an episode on it. That's of the thing I was thinking too with the Epstein thing. We almost can't do like an episode right away, or we have to do like a part 1, then a part 2, just on how much information might come out in the future. Because we might only have like a small slice of it.
That's very true. That's a good point. I mean, I would assume you would hear something in the next year, but who really knows? I don't know. It's hard to say, but those 3 are kind of the big conspiracy things. There's probably some minor ones, but those are probably the 3 people who listen to the show have probably definitely heard about before. But why don't we jump into the UFO related news kind of that happened in 2019 now. Some of these I had heard about, and there's one in particular that I find probably the most interesting I've never heard of. But it wasn't the craziest year for UFO sightings, but as far as the government, or the military, I should say, and UFOs, it was very interesting. So, in April of 2019, the Navy began formalizing and destigmatizing the reports from Navy pilots about UFO sightings. Luis Elzonado, a former senior intelligence officer, told the Washington Post that it was the single greatest decision the Navy had made in decades. So I don't know why it's just the Navy in particular. I feel like it should be all of them, or maybe the Navy just happens to see more of them. You'd think the Air Force might do this, or maybe they had already done it. But being more open about it, I think, is really a great thing, don't you?
Yeah, I think it is great to be more open. I'm hoping the Air Force either like will follow in their tracks or already kind of has begun the process. Those organizations are really slow moving. Like really odd. It's kind of a weird, like a little pun deal, but like that's a hard ship to turn.
It's true. Now,
I was gonna say quick about the Navy.
Yeah.
Possibly seeing more UFO activity. Actually, the second largest air force in the world is the United States Navy. And you would also think, too, they're also seeing USOs.
That's true. That's a good point.
Because they're out patrolling all over the world. So they're going to see some shit. Especially off the coast of California is really big. Have
you ever heard the like theory that UFOs use seawater or salt water to like power their ships?
I have. It's called something like heavy water. They basically turn seawater into some kind of like almost not nuclear, but it's like an energy source. Yeah. I have heard that.
That's kind of interesting. But what I thought was the most important part or most intriguing part about the Navy coming out and saying that in April, because in May, 5 pilots came out and told their experiences with seeing UFOs dating back to 2014 and 2015, all across the East Coast, basically from Virginia to Florida. They went on to describe them as tic-tac or flying tops flying against the wind. Do you remember hearing this when these Navy pilots came out?
I don't remember hearing about like the 5 pilots that came out, but I do remember there was an episode of Joe Rogan podcast. He had on one of the pilots.
Okay.
And it was a really good episode, actually. He actually brought video evidence of it. And it was it was from I believe the nose cam. It was like infrared. So it was pretty pretty compelling footage.
Well, maybe you'll recognize one of these names. I think I only have two of them on here who talk about it. One 10-year veteran, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claimed that he saw UFOs almost daily and that the objects could reach hypersonic speeds and heights of up to 30,000 feet without any visible engine or plumes of infrared exhaust. Graves, who reported his experience to the Pentagon and Congress, said these things would be out there all day with speeds we observed. 12 hours in the air is 11 hours longer than we'd expect. So I don't know if that means, like, how long can their planes hover in the air? Only an hour? Like a jet?
A fighter jet, only like not even like less than 2 hours. It's not going to be like a long time. If you have like a bomber or a cargo jet, those things can obviously, they're not using as much fuel and they're coasting at higher altitudes. They're not doing all the maneuvers. So obviously they can go for thousands of miles for hours and hours. A lot of times too, they can be refueled. Also, fighter jets and helicopters can be refueled also. But
I think what he's saying basically is these ships or whatever they were going so fast and all that at such a high altitude that maybe no man-made ship or plane can do that for, 12 or 11 hours at a time. I'm assuming that's what he means, correct?
Oh, yeah. Like using conventional fuel sources.
Yeah.
They would going that fast, doing all that stuff. It's not possible like for current man-made flying objects that we know of. But I mean, if you really think about us building something like that, it would burn all of its fuel really quickly.
Yeah.
If you had the afterburners on, just, fucking redlining it. Definitely.
So, okay, I guess I have two more of the pilots here. In late 2014, a pilot of a Super Hornet reported a near collision with a UFO when an object that looked like a sphere encasing a cube zipped between two fighter jets flying roughly 100 feet from each other. So that scared the shit out of you. What's that?
Oh, I was going to say a sphere encasing a cube. God, that kind of sounds like you remember seeing those old biblical, like whenever they would show the wheel surrounding like a chair, something like that. That kind of sounds like that. It's like
that famous painting has it in the background, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like a triangular prism deal. But yeah, kind of like that, like a sphere surrounding it or a cone, I guess you call it.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts. Like, it's just to think about it, like, in a movie sense. That'd be cool.
The thing is like, how these guys are describing them, that they look like Tic Tacs. I guess those could be the, what do they usually call them? The cigars. But...
Oh, yeah, the cigar-shaped craft.
The, like, flying top, I don't know if that means, like, the conventional UFO we're used to seeing? Maybe?
Yeah, I imagine. That's what I thought of when I first heard you say that. Flying top is the... our World War I conspiracies, kind of, they describe them as like flying tops, like upside down. So
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So the other pilot, Lieutenant Danny Acoin, could identify a flying object's presence on his radar, missile system, and infrared camera, but was not able to actually see it in his helmet cam, which is very weird. Maybe is he trying to hint that maybe they have a cloaking device of some kind, like a visual cloaking device?
Yeah, that's weird. Well, you would think that it would be the opposite. Like his camera saw it, but he didn't see it.
Well, I think
kind of like how a camera sees on like multiple, like more spectrums than the human eye.
Well, that is what he's saying. He's saying his radars and everything could see it, but he couldn't physically see it.
Okay, I thought you said the opposite. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense then. Kind of like how ghosts.
Yeah, right. Have you ever heard that the speculation some people say where like UFOs, they could be up there and they can kind of alter what a human mind is seeing up there? Like they can alter what they want you to see? You ever heard?
I have heard that they can use like the radiation from their own craft to bend light around their craft. So you basically are looking behind it.
I
have heard that.
Maybe that's what that is. I don't know. The last thing is that Lieutenant Graves guy said, this is his quote about the ships going so fast and turning and all that. He said, speed doesn't kill you, stopping does, or acceleration. So basically what he's saying is they zip so fast where they come to an instant stop that, any ship that we're aware of cannot do that at all. So that's very interesting.
He may have been the guy who was on Joe Rogan, because I believe he said that on Joe Rogan also.
I mean, that makes sense though, right?
It does make sense. If you were say you were going like in a jet, you were going Mach 2, and all of a sudden you just came to a complete stop. It doesn't matter like what was inside holding you back, you would be splattered against the window. If you were going so fast, unless your craft had like inertial dampers, like in a sci-fi movie, that were able to, keep you from banging into the fucking beams every time you moved.
Yeah, so it's really weird. Like, if we think back to, say, Roswell or whatever, and all the other alien things we've talked about, the military's always real quiet, or they're always in cover-up mode, or something like that. So it's, to me, really interesting that they're slowly allowing people to kind of peer into what they're witnessing, which I think is a great thing for the world, if they're actually seeing UFOs or whatever the hell they're seeing out there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of makes you think that if there is that whole plan to like slow feed us, like not alien technology, obviously they're keeping that for themselves, but the fact that there are aliens out there, that maybe it's starting to come to an end. Maybe we're reaching like the peak of it right now.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
That's very
It'd be
possible.
scary. I don't know.
All right, yeah. The final kind of thing in regards to this is apparently the Navy pilot reports. They actually took it to a group of U.S. senators and kind of discussed the whole thing. We don't really know what they talked about, but apparently a lot of the senators were really, really interested in it. So it's kind of like you said, we're kind of, I don't know what, it's coming to the forefront for sure. I have a quote from President Trump about the reports or whatever. I thought was kind of funny. He said, "I did have one very brief meeting on it. People are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly." So there is our president right there. I felt like that statement just meant basically he felt like he had to feel important and get involved in it.
Yeah, like he's in the know. Like,
yeah.
Oh no, don't worry. Like I'm getting high level talks on it. Don't worry.
He probably didn't know
and they're
shit about it.
They're totally not handing me a coloring book during these fucking meetings, so it's all good.
All right, so now let's move on to July. I think everybody knows about this. The plans to storm Area 51 were talked about. 400,000 people would RSVP for it, but when it came time to actually do it, in September it was canceled. Not many people showed up, to be honest. 2 Dutch YouTubers decided, hey, we're in the area, let's try it. They made it within 3 miles of Area 51, and then they were arrested and detained. So we all kind of know that was a catastrophic failure for storming Area 51, which I think is literally not surprising at all.
Yeah, thank goodness that they actually didn't try to do it, because if they would have overwhelmed, like we said in our episode, it's first the local sheriffs that come out and detain you. You don't want to know what's next.
Yeah,
like
it's the Black Ops guys, right? Or the mercenaries.
Well, yeah, it's the camo dudes in Jeeps, so,
Yeah,
those dudes. But you don't want to get past them either, really.
No,
like, it's not good for you. Like,
but
you think that you're a human being with rights at that point. Like, you're not gonna be.
But I don't think that if they what'd you call it? Like, if they actually did storm it really far with a shit ton of people, I don't think they'd just start killing everybody, would you?
No, they wouldn't. I mean, that would be a huge fucking, the media storm on that would be fucking insane.
Yeah, it wouldn't look good.
you couldn't cover up that many fucking dead bodies.
No.
Like, you couldn't say, yeah, 50,000 people all died of exposure in one small area where there happens to be a hole now. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, how about this? Even deeper conspiracy is that a whole bunch of people did show up and they killed him, and they just said it was canceled.
yeah, I don't know about that one, because there would be a fucking sharp decline in the whole internet community traffic on that shit. You would notice the little notch down. So
Okay, so since you listen to Joe Rogan pretty frequently, something that I noticed that I thought was kind of neat is Bernie Sanders apparently went on the air and said if he's elected president, he'll make every UFO sighting or whatever the government has public knowledge. But I feel like all the presidents say that, and then they never do it. So I'm pretty sure Bill Clinton said that too.
yeah, there's you go from being a private citizen who's trying to get elected president to actually being in that position and having like the real shit put on you. Like, even if they only told you a small little dose of the reality of it, I doubt that you would actually go through with it. Like, they wouldn't let you. You think you're the most powerful man on earth, but in reality, you're actually going to meet the most powerful man on earth in that job, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. All right, so let's go on to now this next story. I actually thought is probably the most interesting of all of these UFO sightings. It happened in October of 2019. A rancher stumbled upon the carcasses of 5 young purebred bulls that had had their blood completely drained, also their tongue and genitals surgically removed. This happened in Oregon, mind you. When they were looking at them, there was no signs of buzzards, coyotes, or other scavengers having messed with the corpses. The cow's red fur was still shiny. It just looked deflated. Like, if you look up the pictures of this, it literally looks like if you were going to pop a balloon, but that, and it just deflated down. It's crazy to look at. It's just, we know, obviously, the animal mutilations or cow mutilations and UFO reports have been happening fucking forever, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
So I thought that was really weird that it happened just this year. So I don't really know. You'd think if the cows died, like, they'd have signs of like coyotes eating on them or buzzards pecking at them or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, is this also one of those situations where it's almost like the surgery was too precise to be done by human hands? Is that one of those?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah, almost like it was like everything was perfectly taken off.
Yeah.
Like, there was no like scalpel marks. It wasn't like they were like hacked off. Like you would think if someone was out in the middle of a field, you know, even with a scalpel, you would still fuck up a little bit. Almost, well, and also kind of like the animals had been dropped instead of like chased down or like shot. There was no like kill marks.
No, it's just like they were just sitting there. They had the blood drained out of them, and they, for some reason, removed the tongue and genitals, and they're just kind of sitting there. But they're, I think,
ask anybody who likes hot dogs. Those are the best parts.
The other weird thing is, like, the coats of fur on the animals were perfectly, like, preserved, which is really odd because they didn't really give an estimate of how long they thought they'd been sitting there, but apparently where they found the bodies, like, the ranch hand it's like hard to get to the spot where they were. Like, you can't just walk there. Like, it's a really, really big ranch, and it was hard to, like, get to where their corpses were found.
So are you saying they were like clean? Like their fur was clean?
Yeah, like
Oh.
like how they would look if you were to present them at like a county fair.
Yeah, as someone who's actually like shown cattle at like county fair, even if you like wash them and scrub them like the morning before, once you put them in the pen, like even if it's 20 minutes before the show, all bets are off. They're gonna sit in their own shit.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have to be there with the fucking hose, and hopefully you have gloves, you know, to get that shit off. But
I think what they're more leaning on is like it didn't have much signs of composition.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Kind of thing. But the ranch hand described it as they looked as clean as they would if you were to take them to a show or whatever. But yeah, more or less, I think what he's getting at is like like I've seen a dead cow that's been rotting out there or whatever. Like their fur turns to shit really fast.
Yeah.
So it's really weird. What's more interesting about this thing is just 2 years prior, about 200 miles south in New Princeton, Oregon, a farmer named Andy Davis found one of his cows mutilated and drained of blood as well. So I don't know if aliens like Oregon or what the hell's going on there. The local police, they were investigating. They can't find any signs that a human person would have done this. Deputy Sheriff Dan Jenkins, who's leading the investigation, told the paper this. A lot of people lean towards the aliens. One caller had told us to look for basically a depression under the carcass, because he said that the alien ships will kind of beam the cow up and do whatever they're going to do with it. Then they just drop them from a great height. Kind of like you just said, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to say what this is, but I thought that was a really interesting story that apparently nobody's talking about.
Yeah, I haven't really... I mean, you always hear about those cattle mutilation stories, but they're always years and years old. I haven't heard any that were recent.
Yeah, like this
I kind of thought that went away, just like crop circles went away.
This was like, probably a little over a month ago? That's crazy.
I haven't heard shit about this.
October, 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago. So yeah, there's that. We'll move on to the next one here. In November of 2019, a scientist claims to have photo proof of alien life on Mars. A Mr. Dr. William Ramser, who works at Ohio University, claims he found several examples of insect-like forms similar to bees on Mars, as well as some reptilian-like aliens. Now, I was looking at these photos. Essentially what it is they have the Mars rover going by. You can see the Mars rover tracks, and if you look just slightly in the background, there is an object that looks like a bug of some kind. And this guy is saying that is an insect creature or something on Mars that to him is proof of life there or something. So if you look hard enough, it looks like a bug or an alien or something, but it might just be a rock too. I don't know. You'd have to look at the pictures of it.
Now, hearing about that, I have one super quick question.
Yep.
Was that the University of Ohio or Ohio State University? Because if he's from Ohio State University, it's like, okay, I can trust him. Big Ten school.
It said Ohio University.
Ooh, yeah.
Is that not good?
I don't know about that guy. He's he couldn't even get into Ohio State.
Maybe
he might be posting up there a little bit.
Well, I think he just works there. I mean, maybe he's good.
I'm sure it's a reputable school and all. It's just,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Next thing. Have you heard? Well, go ahead.
I judge colleges based on their conference. So somebody says, "Oh yeah, I went to Stanford." Yeah, not a great team. Then I hear someone, or no, it's Stanford, Yale. If I hear someone like, "Yeah, I went to Yale or Harvard," they don't have very good football teams. But if you went to Alabama, hopefully you can read and you have a good football team. So.
Hey, doesn't Yale hang their hat on the rowing club or whatever?
Oh, like rich people sports?
Yeah. I was
much.
pretty sure that's what they were into.
Yeah, fucking lacrosse and shit like that.
Now, the next thing here I thought was kind of neat. Did you know that NASA is planning on sending a craft to the icy moon of Jupiter called Europa or something like that? Have you heard of this moon before?
Yeah, Europa. I have heard about that. Is that the one with it's covered in ice and it has like liquid underneath it, water? Yeah, that's what they
believes there. So apparently they're sending, not very unique name, the Europa Clipper spacecraft, and they're going to equip it with like an ice penetrating radar to kind of see what's actually inside of the moon, which is kind of neat. Maybe something's frozen in there. Maybe something's hiding in there. I don't know. I thought that was kind of neat.
They think alien life might actually be living in the water underneath it because of thermal vents. There might be a heat source to keep life alive, basically.
Well, I mean, the belief amongst humans, I guess, is that if there's water, that means there could be life, right? Because that's how obviously we live. But anyway, this spacecraft is expected to launch by 2023. So I don't know how long it takes to get there. I assume quite a long time, but yeah. So that's something to look forward to over the next couple of years.
Yeah, when we're in our maybe 40s or 50s, that thing should be getting pretty close. So be excited, folks.
Now,
I was going to say, I actually have heard, it was on the History Channel, they were talking about possible, like, theoretical missions of sending a craft to Europa, and it would have, like, basically a nuclear tip that would melt through the ice, and then once it got through the ice, it would turn into, like, a submarine. I have heard that they were going to send almost like a submarine inside the lander to go into the ice. So I have heard about theoretical missions before. I didn't realize there was like a planned thing.
Well, yeah, I don't think's doing anything like that. I think this is just like an observing spacecraft or whatever, not gonna penetrate anything. As far as they haven't mentioned, I guess they have time to add that if they'd like. Now, this next thing I thought was kind of neat too. NASA's TESS satellite has discovered the closest planet. Okay, how do they describe it? It's basically the nearest planet that resembles Earth. The planet is about 31 light years away from Earth, and it has similarities that could sustain life like Earth does. Its official name is GJ357d. They've nicknamed it Super Earth apparently because it's like way bigger than planet Earth is, but it has similar conditions as we have. So that's kind of neat. I mean, you'd assume if it's like Earth, there definitely could be life there, right?
Oh yeah, especially, I mean, if it's in the Goldilocks zone of whatever kind of star it's going around, that would be really cool if it was so good that we could just like take a spaceship there and just hop off, like they did in like sci-fi movies. That'd be really cool.
31 light years away though.
It's a long time.
You would have
to be in cryo sleep.
You'd have to have a fucking, I was going to say some alien, what do they call those ships? Not refugee ships, but colony ships. You have to have like a colony ship headed there.
Either a colony ship or like it'd be a generational ship where basically like everyone's taking their families with them, and then the kids are expected to become engineers and take over the jobs of their dead grandparents when they get old enough. That kind of situation.
Would you sign up for something like that?
I would not, because I would never see it.
This is true.
If it was a cryo sleep one, I would. But a generational ship like that, because all you're doing is spending the last years of your life in a tin can, hoping that nothing happens to the ship in time for your great grandchildren to one day make it.
I just thought about that. If they saw a planet that's like Super Earth or whatever, all the like resource companies are like, man, we need to get there and get our hands on that precious fossil fuel and all that shit.
Oh, Avatar.
Yeah. They don't care about like the discovery. They just want the resources to make money.
Yeah, they don't care about them giant Smurfs living in their fucking tree. They just want those fucking resources. Yet, I was going to say really quick, like, it's pretty interesting how they actually determine like what a planet is made of and what its atmosphere is made of. One of the classes I took was an astronomy class, and they use like light spectroscopy to like almost like the star that it revolves around. Light passes through the atmosphere, so you can actually tell like what the atmosphere is made of. Like that shit's really cool how they can actually figure that crap out.
Wow, that's neat. I guess that's a good point. I had no fucking idea any of that existed, but it makes sense. But that's really cool.
Like if you were outside of Earth and had like the sun shining through the Earth's atmosphere, like you know how like this is kind of nerdy. Like there's a prism of light, how kind of like that Pink Floyd album, the prism of light makes the rainbow.
Yeah.
If you stretch that prism out, it makes a bunch of little pixels, and like hydrogen like takes certain little pixels away. So does nitrogen. So does oxygen. So if you actually map that, you can see like what is interacting with the light to take those little pixels away. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Okay, so this is a very final thing that I thought was kind of neat that apparently was under my radar. But on December 8th of 2018, China launched the Chang'e 4, and they landed on the dark side of the moon. It's the first ever time something's landed on the dark side of the moon, and they had pictures of it too, which is kind of neat. Now, the funny part about this is that conspiracy theorists were obviously all over this shit. They believe that they were going to find either alien bases on the dark side of the moon or signs that NASA had blown up all the alien bases on the dark side of the moon. And there's like a giant crater on the backside of the moon. That's why some people think they had blown up a base there or something that had been moved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Those people realize why there's a bunch of craters on the moon, right?
You'd assume so. You'd assume so, but yeah, did you know about that?
I hadn't heard anything about China landing on the dark side of the moon. That's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
honestly though, the thing is if you watch like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all you're seeing nowadays is Trump news. They don't have a second to spare for anything other than Trump, earthquakes, or hurricanes. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you're going to see.
That's a very valid point. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe why they'd hide it or whatever, but I thought that's really cool. Like, that's the first ever ship that's been back there, and that happened, this year. So, that's really, really neat. I mean, it's just, like, you can look up the pictures of it. It's just basically the moon still, but yeah, it's kind of neat. They did have that one picture of this giant crater. It looks ominous, because it's dark or whatever, but it's pretty neat.
That's pretty cool. They just landed like a probe, right? There wasn't people inside that.
No, I don't believe there was people in it. It looked like a spaceship that we think of landing on the moon. It just probably, yeah, you're right, probably didn't have anybody in it.
Yeah, I'm surprised that more didn't come out of it, especially with how much China likes to boast about itself. Like, I'm surprised that they didn't like make it more like apparent for everybody.
Well,
every time China does something like internationally, like foreign aid, anything like that, they do like kind of try to make a big show of it. So,
well, maybe America just didn't want to acknowledge that they've done it.
Yeah, that's true. A good point.
They did. The final thing is they did mention that China, I believe, is sending a Mars rover like super soon.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just realized they probably did make a big deal about it. I'm guessing that like every single Chinese citizen like knows about that because they probably see it on state news all the time. But we didn't see shit about it.
Well, yeah, they probably don't want to acknowledge that China's made it to space or whatever. So I don't know. Who knows? That's even a America media conspiracy in itself. But yeah, that kind of does it for our alien/space news that happened in 2019. I think there's a lot of cool shit in there. But anyway, let's move on to Phil's going to take over and kind of scare people for the future. So take her away, Phil.
So there's this guy. Have you ever heard of a man named Peter Turchin?
No, I have not.
Okay, so this is taken from obviously peterturchin.com. He's very good at presenting himself out there. So Peter Turchin is a scientist and an author who wants to understand how human societies evolve and why we see such a staggering degree of inequality in economic performance and effectiveness of governing among nations. So basically, he's studying the breakdown of societies that we are currently seeing.
Okay. So is he kind of like the Doomsday Society type guy, or is he just trying to predict what's going to happen like next year?
Yeah, so kind of answering that a little bit, Peter's approach to answering these questions blends theory building with the analysis of data. So he is the founder of a new transdisciplinary field of cliodynamics, which uses the tools of complexity in science and cultural evolution to study the dynamics of historical empires and modern nation states. So kind of simply put, he blends numbers and histories to form patterns. So he's not like a doomsday sayer. He's just basically someone who looks at the past, like analytically and historically, and finds patterns. And that's what he's done with this.
Okay, that makes sense. You know what? Speaking of this, I can't count how many times I've heard people talking about, in previous years that every great empire falls, and like they always like, oh, America's just like, ancient Rome and all this. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So,
Yeah. So basically what I'm getting into, in using cliodynamics, Peter Turchin has found a pattern in the history of political violence that occurs every 50 years or so. And the pattern is really going to come to a peak, supposedly in the decade of 2020, early 2020.
Okay. So when you say, like, what sort of violence are we talking about here? Like a war or...
Okay. So political violence, according to this man, is anything like in between. So you have like at the bottom, there's person versus person crime. And all the way at the top, you have like interstate war, like country versus country. Okay. So anything in between is like kind of like this political violence of like crime all the way up to murder, about like person versus person, all the way up to all out war between nations. Okay. So the stuff that's in between there.
Okay, I gotcha.
So according to Peter Turchin, in a Vice interview that he did, there are 3 types of political violence. Now this is group versus group violence, group versus individual violence, and individual versus group violence. And I'll jump into like what these 3 things are. So group versus group violence would be like the violence seen at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, when you had like the Antifa assholes going up against like the alt-right assholes, that kind of deal, like group versus group.
Gotcha.
Rioting like sides going at it. You also sometimes see it in like the pro-choice, pro-life, you see some of them skirmish to a smaller degree. It never quite as big as a Charlottesville, which was huge in 2017.
So basically 2 opposing ideals that are so, what is it? Their belief is so deep that they're willing to commit violence for it. Against
each other. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. They think that it's justified, their group committing violence against another group.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there's also the group versus individual violence, which is like when one of those 2 groups sees someone that they think is like a part of the other group, and they attack that individual like out by themselves. So kind of like this would also be like a lynching. Back, which would happen like in the 1960s, 1800s. That's also like this kind of situation. Okay. Like a group like the KKK just lynching someone.
Okay.
So there's also the third one. I'll jump this one really quick. Individual versus group violence. This can be seen with like the mass shooting incidents that we've seen occurring like all over the country and have really increased in the last decade.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how this is all going. Is he's saying that 2020 is the peak, but we've been building up towards this.
So he's saying that 2020 is going to be worse than all the other years.
Well, the peak is going to be around 2020. So it could have already peaked, or it might peak this next year with the election and then simmer down. Like it's kind of hard to say because it's not really a predicting thing. Yeah. So he's just saying that there's a trend, like an kind of like peaks and valleys, and right now we're in a peak, and we may have already gone over the peak, or we might be coming towards the peak.
Well, I hope we're coming down from the peak because, man, there's been so much of that shit.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad over the past 10 years, especially the last one, individual versus group. We've seen so many mass shootings and all of that violence occurring, really starting with Columbine, but really like escalating from there.
Oh,
Like, it's
yeah.
been on a monthly basis now. We're seeing at least one or two or a few come out.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that recently because you and I can't even remember when Columbine happened. I think I was, it was a seventh grade, maybe?
1995?
Seventh grade, maybe? No.
Yeah, like earlier, like fifth or sixth grade.
Yeah. And I always remember, I remember when it happened, it's like that thought never crossed my mind that people would do that. And then it's just kind of been like, school shootings, public shootings, just all sorts of weird shit like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, really, before then, you never heard about it. And then after, that was kind of like that little point in history where everything changed, kind of like 9/11. Like before Columbine, you would never have like those drills where you try to figure out like, what are you going to do? Like, where are you going to hide if there's a school shooting? And then after Columbine, all of a sudden, everyone had those drills.
Yeah, I know. I always tell people that, like, I can't even imagine being a kid, and, like, that's something, like, we used to do fucking fire drills, tornado drills, obviously, and it's like, now you do active shooter drills, which is, gotta be terrifying.
Yeah, definitely. So after 40 years of relative peace among citizens, political violence has increased in the last decade, like I just said, and this is according to Peter Turchin. So really, it's set to peak at the end of this decade, at the beginning of next. And the last incident of heightened political violence was the time between the late 1960s and early 1970s, which saw a high number of political assassinations, race riots, and violence against protesters. This also includes the Kent State Massacre and the DNC riots in Chicago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was trying to think about it, because that basically signifies the death of the hippie era, and then Vietnam and all that kind of around there.
Basically the end to the 50s and 60s, early 60s can be seen as like kind of like the golden age, like the post World War II, and then all of that shit started, and like the baby boomers started to come into their own.
Yeah. Huh. So I wonder what, according to this guy, would cause it to settle down. I suppose he wouldn't have any idea.
Yeah, so one of the things that he says, I was going to get into this a tiny bit later, but I'll say it right now. One of the things that he says is, so there's this 50-year period. The generation that isn't really responsible, but is doing a lot of this violence kind of grows up. And then the next generation remembers growing up with all of these like violent acts, and then they don't do any of that shit. And kind of like the deal that we're in now is the millennials, like almost like they're the ones who are doing a lot of these atrocities. Generation Z, though, they're a lot like calmer and not as radical as like the millennials were when they were younger. Now millennials are all in their like 30s or late 20s.
Okay. Gen Z, the Zoomers, right?
Yeah, the fucking... Yeah, they're like, if you meet them, they like don't really care that much. Well, they've got their phones in front of them, and they're cool with that. That's kind of their deal.
Yeah, but where's the cutoff for the Zoomers?
It was trying to think.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
Like if you were born in maybe like the 90s, you were a Generation Z. Like if you're turning 18, I think it was a few years ago, that was the start of the Generation Z. Turning 18 was a few years ago.
Okay.
So maybe the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Because they didn't actually grow up in the new millennium. Like they kind of grew up in the 2010s. So a little later than us.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I almost think that it might be from 2000 on, but I could be wrong. But I guess technically you and I are millennials, right?
Yeah, we're kind of in that in-between group, between Gen Z and Generation Y. But I don't really like to think of myself as a millennial because I didn't have internet growing up. So I didn't have any of that shit. I didn't have internet until I was 21 in college. Basically in my own room.
I thought that was kind of one of the mainstays of the Gen Zs, is that they grew up in a world where like computers and internet were all accessible. Like you can't imagine, or with cell phones too, you can't imagine a world without that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of their deals is like if you're a Gen Z, like you couldn't imagine not having, unless you're like living out in the backwoods and you are lucky to have dial up and it's not even worth using.
Oh,
Like your
God,
parents.
no. I made a promise to myself, though, that I'm never going to be one of those fucking people who's like, back in my day, I didn't have goddamn internet. Like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to ever be that person. Oh, you're like that already? God damn it,
Yeah.
Phil.
I know, I'm getting fucking old. So in the 50 years before the 1960s, the turbulent times of the 1910s saw many violent occurrences between union and non-union members, including the bombing of the LA Times building and many other bombings throughout the decades. Race riots and violence against minorities also once again peaked during this time. This period was really, like, I think we've actually talked about it before, and you guys on, I believe the Bumblebutt I was on, we talked about the bombings during this period.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was a very violent time. So the time before that was the 1850s and 1860s. And that
Civil
was in
War.
the time, like, just after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And the time during Reconstruction was absolutely terrible for, like, the KKK started up during that time. There were lynchings all across the country. It was really, really bad time. Jim Crow laws really started to get put into legislation. There was also civil rights being curtailed among other minority groups, Jewish, Asian, and Hispanic immigrants and citizens. Like, a lot of laws were made to take away their rights.
You know what? I don't know if you've realized you're doing this, but basically every one of these events that you've listed more or less is, there's a war right around it.
Yeah, the 1910s was pretty big. World War One, right after World War Two, and the Bush Wars that we just went through right now. So,
Well, yeah. Well, you basically did the Civil War.
yeah.
World War One. Then you had Vietnam, more or less. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and it also all starts to go up against. There's always a backdrop about like individual people's rights too. I'm starting to notice, and the right to take away other people's rights, especially like in the 1860s and 70s.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you were listing the like end of or the early 70s, that was basically a huge push for civil rights and stuff. So that kind of makes sense why there'd be a calming period around then. 1910. I mean,
1910 was there was a lot of like voting
Immigrants.
rights, racial immigrants. There was also a huge union. Like
Yeah.
it led to the progressive era. Like it was huge union, non-union member times.
Yeah, I was obviously from, like you said on the other podcast. I mean, I've spent so much time in that era. I'm literally doing it right now, with Charles Ponzi, you know. But that's
Yeah.
more the like economical side of it that I've kind of paid attention to. But it was a lot of immigrants. I think the wealth was pretty imbalanced. You know, it was an interesting time in America.
Yeah, I listened to that episode today. You guys were talking about the Jewish Italian immigrants who were basically pushed out of Southern Europe and Italy.
Yeah.
Russia at that time pushed out millions of Jews. Hundreds of
Really?
thousands of Jews had to flee to the United States in that
Jesus.
same time period. Like Adam was saying, a lot of Jewish people were kicked out of Europe at that time.
Yeah, I had no idea Italy did that, you know, but I guess, you know, Russia's always kind of been, I don't know, they've had a lot of questionable decisions over the years.
Yeah, they had a lot of pogroms that they, or pogroms, however you want to call it. They had a lot of those, and it was really, really fucking bad, like, to be a Jewish person. If, say, like, the water, like, the well in your village went bad, you were the first person blamed. Like, it was, the Jewish guy must have poisoned it. Like, you were the first person blamed for anything. Anything bad happened.
It's, that's like, the witches and, witch trials and stuff. That's the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that has to do with fucking, the same.
Well, no, if like
unlike of the
if like people's crops were dying off or something, they assumed it was a witch's curse. So
Oh, yeah, that's true. Probably because there wasn't a lot of Jews around at that time. Persecute, so they had to find somebody.
they always got to blame somebody for your problems, I guess. But
Anytime you have a bad hair day, just. So I was also gonna say, like, one of the little bright sides of this is there was a lot of like, out of these situations, there was only like one in the 3 examples I gave. The era after, like the 1860s and 70s, got even worse with like the Jim Crow laws, the anti-immigrant laws, anti-minority laws, basically. But after the turbulence of the 1910s, we came into the progressive era. After the turbulence of the 1960s, we had like the big push for civil rights and like the rights of minorities. So, I mean, there might be like a light at the end of this tunnel. Hopefully it doesn't go to shit like it did in the 1870s and 80s. But
that's what I'm kind of getting out of all of this, that if this guy he believes we're nearing the end of it. I mean, obviously it'd be awesome if the whole active shooter thing would, stop. People stop doing that. Obviously that's fucking insanely atrocious. And whatever else, So hopefully that means that we're nearing an end of it. That'd be much different world to live in. But I feel like, let's say like the shooters or like the groups versus groups or any of that, like if we reached a point where it was becoming the end of that, I still feel like this generation right now is so scared that that's still going to happen. It'll always kind of be in the back of your head. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was like the bad shit that happened from these eras. Like the older people now are still scarred from thinking like that shit's going to happen. Like I remember talking to people when Obama got elected, and a lot of the older people were like, well, I think he's going to get assassinated, because they grew up in a time when they would see a person like him, either politically or, like a racially, like an African American man, and they would think, oh, he's going to get assassinated because that's what people do,
Yeah,
there's also that kind of shit.
Yeah, that's very true. Feel like, not that I would ever want any political figure to be assassinated, but I feel like it's fucking almost impossible, man. They have so much goddamn security and so much extra precautions for everything they do. Like, you're not going to pull it off.
Yeah, unless that person gets like that 1 in a million perfect timing situation, kind of like, I think Reagan, that happened, where he just happened to be like right place, right time, right as Reagan was getting like either out of the building to his car or the other way around, or it gets let happen, like someone lets it happen. One of those situations.
They Epstein him.
Yeah, one of those deals. So I was going to finish it off real quick. There's another kind of reason in Turchin's like explanation of all of this. So in that 2012 Vice interview, when asked what is the cause of the violence, he answered, historically, the trouble has always come from people with power and the number of those people who want the most power. There are too many political entrepreneurs who are all trying to get power, and they get frustrated, which is how revolutions start, when members of the elite try to overturn the political order to better suit themselves.
Okay, well, I can see that. That's not a fallacy, and I don't think that's not choosing any sort of political party or anything. That's just people want power, whatever. So, it's the oldest story,
around. Even I was just watching this documentary on the War of the Roses. That all happened because there were basically these people called duchies that were created out of the royalty, and they all wanted more and more power. And that's kind of how the War of the Roses started. So it's an old story of these, people wanting more power. You get a little taste of it and you keep pulling that string,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very valid point. It's kind of people wanting power is kind of, I guess, the human condition. I don't know. It's a flaw with human beings, I guess. I don't know how else you'd put it, but
yeah. One of the situations he does kind of include is there has been an increase in the number of millionaires over the past 2 or 3 decades. So they're not really the 1% anymore. These millionaires are now the 2%. All of these millionaires get very politically motivated, and more money gets thrown into the political sphere. And that also is causing a lot of this too. There's just so much at stake with all of this shit that it gets overhyped. So I think that a little bit too, but that's pretty much the end of that. It's just kind of one of those things where it's, you hope we're over the hill and not the worst is yet to come. But really looking at like 2016, that was mostly a meme war. Hopefully this is, just kept to the internet again. Not really like all out street violence and group on group action.
Well, I mean, it's very interesting to see patterns with humanity. Obviously, that's kind of what that is. Like you said, hopefully we're kind of over the hump. The violence is gone. 2020 will be a better outlook for everybody. Obviously, my 2020 wish list, I'm going to put, let's hope maybe the government will declassify all the alien files or something, or UFO files, or maybe something in that direction. I think that'd be, if we could live through that in our generation, like acknowledgement of other life in the galaxy, I think that would make that'd be amazing. Do you have any 2020 wish list things, Phil?
Self-driving cars that are available to everyone and fully automated, so I don't have to touch that fucking steering wheel. Oh, that'd be the greatest decade ever if I just got that. I'd never want to drive again. I'm not a driver.
I feel like we're a few decades off from that.
I think we're less than a decade. I really think that like the next generation you won't even have to be like in the front seat anymore.
I mean, that would be amazing, because who the hell wants to drive anywhere? Yeah,
exactly. I would take that over, like, a lot of people want to see like hover cars. People want to see, some crazy people want to see like the biotech implants. I don't want to see that shit at all. Like I'll be the laggard in that situation. Like, I'll never have that shit put into my fucking body. But self-driving cars, I would totally trust the robot in that situation.
So you're not afraid of the robots rising up?
No, not at all.
Not at all? Okay. Well,
no, I've got my I've got my robot vacuum. I got Kirby, and he takes care of the floors for me now. So I'm stage 1 in this.
You know what? I could see that becoming a big conspiracy in 2020. Is like the AI thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. The supercomputers taking over.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. But anyway, yeah, we've been going for a while here, so why don't we mosey on out of here? We're gonna put the usual ending credits on hiatus for right now. We'll be back next week with a regular episode. Actually, we're gonna pick up Phil? CIA Part 2. Gonna finish off with them spooks.
Yep. Finish off with the CIA Part 2. It's gonna be an interesting one. I've got some stuff all ready to go, and yeah, hopefully I don't have my car hijacked electronically. So
hopefully not. The final thing here is, I know any of the alien stuff that I talked about. Definitely give a Google to any of those and look at the pictures and see for yourself. It's very fascinating. So, otherwise, guys, we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.